She was only a simple woman working in a quiet corner of a busy office. Her name was Emily Walker, and she had given 5 long years of her life to the same company. 5 years without a single day off. 5 years of showing up early, staying late, and finishing every task without complaint. But that morning would change her life forever, because the FBI walked through the glass doors with heavy steps, and in front of her entire office. They snapped cold metal handcuffs around her wrists. The office froze in silence. The sound of keyboards stopped. The whispers started. Some people gasped. Some laughed under their breath, and Emily stood there in her plain white shirt and old slacks, her hair tied in a simple ponytail, her eyes lowered to the floor as 2 agents held her arms. She did not fight. She did not scream. She only breathed slowly, as if her soul was somewhere far away. Her co-workers had always mocked her. Jessica, with shiny blonde hair, leaned over cubicles to whisper cruel words, calling Emily a little spreadsheet mouse, saying she belonged in the basement with a mop. Tom, the loud salesman with his flashy watch, joked that she probably never left the city, and others laughed along, thinking it was funny, but Emily never answered back. She only kept working, her fingers moving fast across the keyboard, her face still, her heart heavy but hidden. For years she had been invisible, not because she had no skill, but because she chose silence. She had only one photo on her desk, a picture of her elderly mother, the only person she truly cared for. The photo sat in a small frame beside her computer, and sometimes when no one was looking, Emily would pause her typing, her hand hovering above the keys, her eyes resting on that photo for strength before she continued her endless work. The agents began searching through her desk, pulling out files and papers, opening drawers, scattering her organized world, and the whispers in the office grew louder. Jessica smirked and said in a sweet but fake voice that Emily must have been hiding something all along. Tom leaned back in his chair and chuckled that the quiet mouse finally slipped, and others nodded, their faces filled with satisfaction instead of pity. Emily's boss, Mr. Hargrove, stood by the door, his brow furrowed but his mouth closed. He did not defend her. He did not speak for her. He only watched with the same confusion mixed with fear that spread across the room. Emily lifted her head for one moment, her eyes meeting his, but she found no comfort there, only silence. The truth was that Emily had been noticing strange numbers in the company's books for months. Transfers that did not make sense, balances that disappeared overnight. But she kept quiet, saving small notes and screenshots, telling herself that she would gather enough proof before speaking. But someone else had already seen her careful eyes, someone who wanted her gone, and they set a trap to frame her before she could expose them. As the FBI pulled her toward the elevator, she heard laughter ripple behind her, Jessica's laugh sharp as glass, Tom's deep voice adding fuel, others whispering that she had fooled them all, that the quiet worker had been a criminal in disguise. Emily did not reply. She did not cry. She only kept her head high, her wrists bound by steel but her spirit strangely steady. She remembered the sticky notes that had been left on her monitor, cruel messages like "dress like you belong here." She remembered the day Jessica spilled red wine on her at the company party and laughed while phones snapped pictures. She remembered the photo where she had been pushed to the back, barely visible in a sea of bright colors. And she remembered the cold nights when she fixed mistakes left for her on purpose, staying until 2 in the morning, her eyes burning, her heart breaking, but still finishing the work. And she remembered giving the finished reports back to Jessica, only to watch her take the credit with a smile. Now all those small cruelties added up to this moment. This public humiliation, this storm of whispers and stares. Emily stepped into the elevator with the agents, the doors sliding shut. Her last sight of the office was the photo of her mother still on her desk, tilted sideways from the search, and Jessica standing nearby with a victorious grin, her arms crossed, her eyes shining with triumph. But what no one in that room knew was that Emily had already saved copies of the suspicious files. She had already sent a backup to someone she trusted outside the company, and though she walked out in chains, she still carried the truth inside her mind. The truth that would one day come back to haunt every single person who had laughed at her pain. The elevator descended. The air heavy, the agent silent. Emily closed her eyes for a moment and breathed. She was accused, she was framed, and her life as she knew it was ending. But somewhere deep inside she whispered to herself that this was not the end. This was only the beginning, because the same simple woman they mocked would return one day. And when she returned, she would not be invisible. She would not be broken. She would bring the whole truth crashing down on them. The sound of the heavy door closing behind her was like thunder in her ears. Emily Walker was no longer an accountant in a quiet office. She was now a prisoner in a world of steel bars and cold concrete. The handcuffs were removed, but in their place came the weight of chains, rough fabric of a gray jumpsuit, and eyes that looked at her with judgment and suspicion. The guards did not care about innocence. They only saw the papers that called her guilty. The cell was small and smelled of rust. The bed was only a thin mattress on iron. The air was damp, and the hall echoed with voices of women hardened by years inside. Emily sat on the edge of the bed with her hands folded, her heart pounding. She thought of her mother at home, waiting, not knowing, maybe crying. And she whispered inside her chest that she had to survive. No matter what cruelty waited here, she had to live long enough to clear her name. The first morning was harsh. Breakfast was nothing but stale bread and watery soup. A tall inmate with a scar on her cheek shoved past her, sneering that soft little office girls would not last a week. Others laughed, calling her princess, mouse, or weakling. Emily did not answer. She carried her tray to a corner, ate quietly, and kept her head down. But her silence did not protect her. It only made her a target. One woman snatched her glasses, crushed them under her boot, and said she would not need those to scrub floors. Another dropped a dead rat into her blanket and shouted, "Welcome to your new roommate." The dorm roared with laughter. Emily's stomach turned, but she did not scream. She wrapped the rat in a rag, carried it to the trash, and scrubbed her hands until the skin burned, her face calm but her heart shivering inside. And when she returned to her bed, she folded her blanket neatly, as if to tell herself she still had control over something small days dragged on. Chores were endless, scrubbing pots until her hands bled, sweeping halls while guards watched with cold eyes. The cruelty did not stop. Trays of food dumped on her lap, mocking words whispered in her ear. But Emily endured. Her silence was not weakness. It was the same patience she had used in the office when coworkers tried to break her spirit. She remembered every insult, every unfair trick, and now she remembered every cruel act inside these walls too. Then came a shift. One evening after a long day of work, a thin young inmate approached her quietly. Her name was Lena, her eyes nervous but kind. She whispered that she had seen how Emily stayed calm, how she never cried or shouted. And she asked softly if Emily was really guilty. Emily shook her head, her voice steady as she said, "No, I was framed." Lena nodded, saying she believed her, because she too had been accused of something she never did. She was a hacker blamed for crimes bigger than her reach. And nobody believed her either. Later, Emily met Marta, an older woman with strong hands and tired eyes. Marta had been inside for years. She knew the routines, the weak spots, the guards who cut corners. She saw Emily's quiet strength and told her, "Don't let them crush you. Don't let them see fear." Emily listened, her mind already taking in every word, every detail, because she knew numbers, she knew patterns. And prison had patterns too. Nights were long, the dorm filled with snores, whispers, and the sound of guards' boots. Emily lay on her bunk with eyes open, tracing every sound like a ledger in her mind. The timing of lights, the shift changes, the doors that opened and closed. She watched, she noted, she learned, just as she had once done with spreadsheets. Now she did with prison life, and slowly a thought grew. A thought more dangerous than any file she had touched. A thought that whispered escape, but escape was not yet. She still had to endure. One day during lunch, a broad-shouldered inmate spilled soup on her clothes and laughed, calling her a joke. Emily stood slowly, wiped her clothes with a napkin, and walked to the sink without a word, her hands steady, her jaw tight. Lena noticed her silence and slipped her a clean rag. Their eyes met, and in that small exchange a bond was sealed. Quiet but strong Emily kept her secrets hidden, but in her heart she whispered to herself that she was not only surviving, she was preparing. Every insult became fuel, every cruel trick became a reason, and every act of kindness became a piece of her strength. The same patience that had carried her through years of office bullying now became her weapon. She would wait, she would learn, she would not break that night while others slept. She held her blanket close and thought of her mother. She imagined her waiting by the window, still believing in her daughter, and Emily swore silently that she would return. She would not let her name die in this place. She would not let the truth be buried. She would find a way out. She would bring justice back with her, and those who had laughed in the office would one day face the same chains now pressed against her skin. Her eyes closed at last, but her mind stayed sharp, like the pencil she once held over spreadsheets. She was still counting, still calculating, still planning, and deep inside she knew this was not her ending, this was her training. The days turned into weeks, and Emily Walker carried the same silence through each cruel hour. She was mocked in the halls, tripped in the yard, shoved against cold walls, and laughed at whenever she tried to eat her small meals. But each insult and each shove did not break her. It built something harder inside her chest, something no one could see but everyone could feel growing. A quiet fire that would not die. One afternoon in the dining hall, an inmate with a tattooed neck grabbed a letter from Emily's hand. It was the only letter she had from her mother, written with shaky words that spoke of love and longing. The inmate read it aloud in a mocking voice, twisting the soft words into laughter for the crowd. The hall echoed with jeers, claps, and cruel whistles. Emily stood still for a moment, her heart twisting. Then she walked forward slowly, her eyes steady on the woman's face, her voice low but firm as she said, "Give it back." The woman smirked, holding the letter high, but Emily did not blink. She repeated now, her voice stronger. And the woman faltered, threw the letter aside, and walked away muttering. Emily picked it up gently, folded it, and pressed it close to her chest, her hands trembling but her face calm. The room quieted, and for the first time the others saw that silence could be steel. That night Lena whispered to Emily that she had never seen anyone face down the tattooed woman. Emily only nodded, but inside she knew something had shifted. She was no longer invisible. The fire inside her was visible now in her eyes. Marta, the older inmate, saw it too, and one evening she pressed something small into Emily's palm. It was a simple wrench, scratched and old, a tool from her time in maintenance. Marta's voice was low as she said, "Luck follows those who don't give up." Emily closed her fingers around the wrench, its weight cold and real, and she hid it inside her thin mattress. A secret strength for nights to come. The bullying did not stop, but now Emily no longer looked down. When food was spilled on her, she cleaned herself slowly. When insults were thrown, she walked away with steady steps. Her silence no longer looked like weakness. It looked like defiance, and in the hidden corners of the prison, in whispers carried between bunks, her name began to travel. Some said she was too calm, some said she had a plan, and Emily only listened without showing a hint of what she carried inside. Every night she lay on her bed with her eyes open, watching the shadows, counting the guards' footsteps, hearing the clicks of keys and the slam of doors. She mapped the patterns in her mind, the timing of lights, the 30-minute gaps during system checks, the blind spots where cameras turned too slow. She remembered each detail the way she once remembered columns of numbers. Her brain was a ledger, and the prison itself became a book she was balancing. Lena often slipped onto her bunk during late nights, whispering stories of the outside, of computers and codes, her quick mind restless even behind bars. Emily listened, and in return told her about the strange numbers she had once traced in her office, how she had saved files before she was framed. Lena's eyes widened, She said, "You already have the truth." Emily nodded, whispering that truth was her weapon, and she would carry it out of here one day. Marta joined them too, her rough voice steady, as she described the old maintenance tunnels, the vents she had once repaired, the weak locks that guards never checked. Emily listened carefully, piecing together each detail, combining Marta's knowledge of the building with Lena's sharp ideas and her own careful timing. Piece by piece, like a puzzle, an idea grew, an escape that was more than a dream. It was math, it was planning, it was survival. But the prison tested her again. One evening she was locked in a storage closet by two laughing inmates who shouted through the small window that the little mouse would squeak in the dark. The air grew thick, Emily's breathing short, her fists pounding against the door. But she did not scream for long. Instead she counted, she timed, she measured each breath. And when the guard finally opened the door hours later and laughed at her pale face, Emily walked out steady, her knuckles white, her eyes sharper than before. She whispered inside her heart that fear would not control her. The respect of some began to show. Small nods in the yard, space given in the food line, whispers that she was stronger than she looked. Lena looked at her with new pride. Marta called her unbreakable, and Emily only stayed quiet. But deep inside she felt the fire burn brighter. The cruelty had pushed her to the edge, but instead of falling, she had found balance. She no longer dreamed of surviving prison. She dreamed of leaving it. She dreamed of the office faces that had laughed when she was handcuffed. She dreamed of Jessica's smirk, Tom's chuckle, and the file she had hidden before that terrible morning. Each dream was not weakness, it was fuel, and she knew the time was coming when silence would no longer be her shield, but her sword. That night, while thunder rolled outside the prison walls, Emily held the wrench hidden under her blanket, the cool metal against her palm. She whispered to herself that the fire inside her was ready. The breaking point had come and gone, and now there was only one path forward: escape. The night was heavy with rain, and thunder shook the sky like drums of war. The prison walls trembled under the storm. Guards cursed as lightning cut across the yard. But inside one small corner of the dorm, three women whispered with steady breaths. Emily Walker, Lena the young hacker, and Marta the older worker. They had been waiting for this moment, counting each second, preparing each step. And tonight was the night. Emily had memorized the timing. The cameras went weak for 30 minutes during the system reboot. Marta had shown them the vent near the laundry that could be loosened with the old wrench she had given Emily, and Lena had tied together dryer cords strong enough to climb. It was not just an idea anymore. It was a plan ready to move. Their eyes met in silence, each woman knowing there was no turning back, because once the storm passed, the chance would vanish. The guards shouted across the halls, distracted by leaks from the heavy rain. Boots echoed on wet floors, keys jingled in careless hands, and the dorm shook with each flash of light. Emily whispered now, her voice calm but sharp. They rose from their bunks and walked as if going for chores, but their steps were quick and their eyes steady. Marta led the way through the corridor, her memory guiding them to the hidden vent. The laundry room was dark, the smell of damp clothes and soap mixed with the roar of the storm outside. Marta knelt by the wall, her old hands steady as she pulled at the screws. Emily pressed the wrench. Tight and turned. The metal groaned, but loosened. Lena kept watch, her nervous eyes darting at the door. Lightning lit the small space. Thunder covered the noise. And at last the vent opened with a creak, wide enough for them to crawl inside. Emily went first, her body sliding into the narrow tunnel. The air thick and sour, her elbows scraping against the cold steel. Marta followed behind her, and Lena crawled last, clutching the cords like a lifeline. Their breaths echoed in the dark. The tunnel was endless, but Emily kept moving, her hands steady, her mind whispering each second like a clock. The storm above roared, but inside the tunnel, only silence. And determination lived. They reached the shaft that dropped into the sewage tunnel. The stench rose up, foul and heavy, but Emily did not pause. She tied the dryer cords tight and lowered herself down. Her hands burned against the rough rope. Her feet splashed into the shallow water below. Marta followed, her body heavy but strong, and Lena last, her small frame sliding down fast. The three women stood together in the filth. Rainwater dripping from cracks above, freedom close enough to taste. Emily looked at her watch, counting the minutes left before the cameras returned. She whispered move, and they followed the narrow sewage path, their steps careful on the slick. Stone, rats scattered, water splashed. Thunder masked their noise. The tunnel seemed endless, but Emily led without hesitation. Each turn remembered from Marta's guidance, each step timed in her mind. Her patience now a weapon that guided them closer to the outside world. At last they reached the grate that opened into the stormy night. Marta pressed her shoulder against the rusted bars. Grunting, Emily joined her. The wrench pressed hard against the bolts. Metal groaned, rust cracked, and finally the grate gave way. Rain poured in, cold and pure, washing their faces, the sky above wide and open. Emily climbed out first, her feet sinking into the wet grass, the wind whipping her hair loose from the ponytail. Marta pulled herself out, then Lena, their faces shining with rain and relief. The prison lights glowed faintly in the distance. Alarms had not yet sounded. Thunder covered their escape, and the three women stood in the storm, breathing the air of freedom. Marta pressed the old wrench into Emily's hand again, saying, "Keep it, for luck." Emily closed her fingers around it, nodding. The cold metal now a symbol of what she had survived. Lena pulled a folded piece of paper from her jumpsuit, the sketch she had once drawn of Emily's mother. She handed it back, whispering, "Keep this safe." Emily's eyes softened, but she shook her head, pressing it back into Lena's hand, saying, "You keep it safe for me." Their fingers touched for a moment, a silent promise. They knew they could not stay together. The search would be wide. The guards would soon find the open vent. Marta whispered that she would go north. Lena whispered she would head east. Emily only nodded, her face calm, her mind already on the truth she carried, the files she had once saved, the weapon that could bring down the ones who framed her. They embraced quickly, the storm hiding their tears, and then they parted, each fading into the night like shadows. Emily walked alone through the rain, her jumpsuit soaked, her shoes heavy with mud, but her steps steady, each one stronger than the last. She whispered to herself that she was not just running, she was returning to finish what had been started, returning to carry the truth that would destroy those who laughed as she was taken in chains. The storm raged around her, lightning split the sky, but inside her chest burned a fire that no storm could put out behind her. In the prison, a guard finally noticed the open vent. Shouts echoed. Alarms rang. Searchlights swept across the yard. But it was too late. Emily was gone. The woman they mocked, the mouse they framed, the prisoner they tried to break. She was free, and she carried not only her own strength, but the weight of justice waiting to strike. The rain still poured as Emily Walker walked through the night, her clothes heavy, her hair dripping, her body cold, but inside her heart burned with fire. She was free now, not because the world gave her freedom, but because she had taken it. Her mind whispered the same words again and again. "I carry the truth, I carry the proof, and I will return for justice." She did not go to her old home. It was too dangerous. Eyes were searching for her everywhere. Instead, she made her way to a quiet street where a friend from her college years lived. His name was Daniel. He had once studied law and now worked for a small firm. Emily had sent him copies of the files before she was arrested, and she prayed he had kept them safe. Her body shivered as she knocked on his door, the night heavy with silence. The door opened slowly, and Daniel's eyes widened. He whispered, "Emily, you should not be here. They are hunting you." But she shook her head, her voice steady as she said, "You still have the files." "Right." Daniel looked around nervously, then nodded and handed her a small drive, saying, "I kept it, but this is dangerous." Emily took it, her hands strong, her eyes sharp, and she said, "This is not danger. This is truth." With the drive in her pocket, She needed someone brave enough to share the story, someone who would not be silenced. She found Sarah, a young journalist working for a small but fearless news outlet. Sarah listened. As Emily spoke in a quiet room lit only by a lamp, Emily showed her the files, numbers and transfers, dates and names, each line of proof more powerful than the last. Sarah's eyes grew wide, her breath quick. She whispered, "This is huge." Emily nodded, her voice calm but filled with fire. "They framed me to hide this. They used me as a shield, and now the world must know together. They worked night after night." Sarah cross-checked every detail. Emily explained every line, every strange balance, every hidden account, her mind as sharp as it had once been over spreadsheets. But now the stakes were higher. This was not about deadlines or reports. This was about her life, about justice, about her mother waiting at home. Sarah finally said, "We have everything we need." And Emily whispered, "Then let the world see it." The article went live at dawn. The headline screamed across the internet. "Wrongfully accused accountant exposes real fraud." It spread like fire. People clicked, people shared. People asked who Emily Walker was, and the story unfolded. Jessica, the sleek co-worker, Tom, the flashy salesman, and Mark, the vice president. Their names all written clearly in the files. The public gasped. The office that had mocked Emily now trembled, because their secret was burning under the light of truth. Crowds gathered outside the company headquarters, shouting for justice, waving signs with Emily's name. Hashtags spread across social media. People wrote, "Emily Walker Truth." People said she was the voice of all who had been bullied, ignored, or silenced. The pressure grew stronger each hour, and news stations picked it up. Sarah interviewed Emily with her face in shadows, her voice steady but calm. She said, "I was mocked, I was framed, I was caged, but I never let go of the truth. And now the truth is free." Inside the office, Jessica sat frozen at her desk, her phone buzzing with messages calling her a liar. Tom paced his condo, shouting that it was not his fault. Mark locked his door, but reporters camped outside his home. The walls were closing in on them, and Emily knew it was only the beginning. Because the files were only the first strike, Sarah soon uncovered an email, an old message from Mark to Jessica, laughing about how they had framed the mouse who will never see it coming. Sarah published it, and the world exploded with rage. Proof of the plot laid bare in words they had written themselves. The FBI, who had once snapped the cuffs on Emily's wrists, now faced the fury of the people. Questions shouted at them. How did you arrest the wrong woman? How did you not see the truth? Their silence made them guilty too, but Emily did not focus on their shame. She focused only on the next step. The courtroom, the place where justice would finally be spoken aloud. She sat in the shadows, watching as protests filled the streets, as people demanded charges, as Sarah's articles were shared thousands of times. Emily did not smile. She did not cheer. She only folded her hands, whispering inside her heart that she was coming closer, step by step, to the day when the chains around her wrists would be nothing more than a memory.